The Tin Hut, and so happy to be back here on MRH Live, My Racehorse Live. Nick Hines, of course, with my very good friend and colleague Joe Moran. Joe, it's been too long.
Yeah, it's we've been talking about bringing this project back for a while now, so I'm happy we're going to do it, and hopefully we'll be on a pretty consistent schedule now. Hopefully have some guests come on and things of that nature. Catch up on the table, on the stable, talk about just horse racing in general. Exciting time of the year. Oaks Derby Trails kind of in the middle of the action right now, so it's a lot of things are happening almost every weekend, and just exciting time for racing.
Yeah, so indeed, this is about you. Obviously, the owners, our partners out there to kind of, get us back into rhythm with these live shows. Of course, feel free. We've got the lovely Hannah behind the scenes addressing questions that come through between Joe and myself. We'll do our best to try, and enlighten you on the goings on, or perhaps, horses that may have had some recent setbacks or recent success stories that you want to address. But, for February 10th, 2026, Joe, you pointed out the fact that the Road to the Kentucky Derby, it's in full swing. We're just 80 days away from the first Saturday in May, 79 days away from the Lilies for the Phillies for the Kentucky Oaks. And, in regards to that, I mean, this weekend itself, we've got 3 Derby preps that are coming up. We did have 3 Derby preps from last week.
Yeah, absolutely. And my favorite part about this time of the year is every prep that goes by, the whole
Yeah.
picture changes. Your opinion changes. I know for me, when nearly won at Gulfstream Park, it kind of said, "Son of not this time." That's continuing to improve. One that's really jumped up. And then you look at Santa Anita this past weekend with Plutarch, a horse that kind of had to move to the turf to get that success, but he's gotten better with each and every start. I really thought he finally put it all together last weekend, and I think he's a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, and I just want to backtrack a little bit. It's kind of crazy to think our friend Straight No Chaser who's doing his diligence at stud, obviously, racking up covers and whatnot. Exciting to see what his stud career will evolve to. But it was about a year ago here in the next week or so that you were there for the Riyadh Dirt Sprint for a Breeders' Cup win, and you're in. Unfortunately, we weren't able to win consecutive years as far as the sprint championship. But tell us a little bit about your trip there and the vibe overall. Of course, the Road to the Kentucky Derby goes through Saudi this weekend with the Saudi Derby with 30 points to the winner.
Yeah, I was saying I was getting a little sad hearing everyone talking about making their trips out there. And this year, the U.S. contingent was about, I think, quadruple. I think last year we only had 4 horses. This year, I think they said they tentatively had 16 horses on the plane. So it would have been fun to go out there with a little more action. It was a small group last year, just Dan Blacker, McPeak's team, D'Angelo, and Chad Summers. But it was fun. We were kind of just hung out at the barn every day, and it was, I didn't get to experience Dubai to compare the two. Um, Saudi was a little more quieter, and it was a lot of fun just kind of hanging out at the track. But will certainly be missed. But it was a great experience overall. Coming out on top made it even better. But kind of once in a lifetime type of trip.
Yeah, pretty remarkable. Not to mention the fact that we had a lucky lottery winner. Of course, one of our partners that spent some time there, quality time, and had an opportunity to meet that particular individual at Del Mar this past summer.
Yeah, Steve Carpenter is great. We had a great time. You never know when you have one lucky winner to come out there. I kind of went there, said I'd never met Steve before, and we're meeting a far away from home, but it was a great trip, and just great time spending with the horse, with the team Blacker, Juan, the assistant. So it was a lot of fun having Steve out there.
All right, well, let's kind of move forward with the Saudi Cup in mind. They drew for that card today, and I know that on FanDuel Racing, we'll have that entire card, including the Saudi Derby, which is a win and you're in. But you've got horses that are coming from the United States, and namely Hall of Fame trainer Bob Baffert with Nevada Beach and Nisos. You had an opportunity to watch them train there at Santa Anita. Any insight as to how they're stacking up for this particular race?
Yeah, well, I'll say, and Nisos has always been one that catches the eye in the morning. I will say I haven't been blown away by his last few starts, right, including the Breeders' Cup. They've been a little bit more
Right.
workmanlike, and he's had to work hard for it. I kind of gave him the benefit of the doubt because he did not have the easiest training campaign into the Breeders' Cup, so I thought he almost needed that race to come back against Nevada Beach. Nevada Beach really impressed me. I feel like he's a horse that's putting it all together. I did not think he was this good. So I think he has the right to improve and turn the tables if you really want. But I do think it's going to be pretty tough to beat Forever Young. Horse that's ran over that track before. Uh, just he's an incredible horse to travel and do everything that he's done in his career. So I hate to say my heart is kind of rooting Forever Young. I want the Breeders' Cup champ to go out there and do that. It's just been incredible what he's done in his career.
Yeah, I mean, not to mention the race that he had there in Saudi last year, and what a tremendous horse race it was. Kind of interesting, and you can maybe touch on this. Obviously, the connections to Shida Yahagi had mentioned the fact that they were looking to potentially take the turf route eventually here with Forever Young. I think they're going to keep their options open with Dubai per se. But what do you think went into that process? I mean, was it the fact that he conquered U.S. soil and won the Breeders' Cup Classic, and of course voted the older horse of the year? Do you think they essentially put that chapter away and now they're going to prove that he's an all-round horse? Is that what it is, or do you think it has something to do with the Japanese aspect in breeding? Because a lot of it is turf predicated.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's just kind of how they treat the sport. Obviously, I had the luxury of going to Japan in 2024 for the yearling sale,
Right.
um, and it's a very prideful community in horse racing. They like to see their horses continue on running longer than we do in the U.S. And I think it's an accomplishment that he can kind of do whatever. And there's a horse I'm trying to think of, and you might be able to remember his name. I believe it was John Gosden that had won in Saudi on the dirt and then went to the turf in Dubai when you would have thought he would have been the favorite. I might have it vice versa. And I was actually talking with Dan Blacker about it the other morning,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe talking about surfaces too, of how different the Saudi and Dubai surface are, just coming off, straight no chaser, having a little different appeal for each surface. So potentially that's it. I can't imagine that's the case with Forever Young, but I think there could be various different answers. I think at the end of the day, they want to see him win every possible race on every surface and make him the most attractive horse. I'm sure they've gotten plenty of stallion offers in America, but my guess is he'll land in Japan if
Oh,
I had
yeah,
to take a guess.
that's without a doubt.
Yeah.
There's no question as to what the intent is, and
Yep.
it's just pretty remarkable. We had a race the other night on FanDuel Racing, and I know there's various aspects of the wishing well, of course, the dam of the late great Sunday Silence, and Sunday Silence was the American horse turned Japanese stallion that just changed the ultimate breeding game there in Japan. So,
Yeah.
so putting you on the spot, if you were to have a Saudi Cup selection, do you think this is Forever Young's race to lose, or do you think a horse like say Nisos could go there and spoil the party?
Well, I'll never count Bob Baffert out of any big race, but I'm going to stick Forever Young. I mean, every time I think the travels become too much for him, and I was kind of against him in the Breeders' Cup, I said, this horse, it's unbelievable how much mileage he has under him just in an airplane. But I just think he's such a resilient horse, and he's so tactical. He can kind of do whatever you ask of him. So to me, it's his race to lose. Anytime you're in this type of race, you're facing plenty of other quality horses, but I still think it's his race to lose.
Yeah, I would tend to agree, and I think not to mention the fact that he's been a globetrotter in his own right. I think that there's a lot that goes into that. And the one thing to consider about Nisos, and I know that you obviously being in the kind of the heat of the battle with Breeders' Cup Week, it's myself. The tests and procedures they put these horses through. I mean, look what they had done with White Abario. Obviously, Bob Baffert had to encounter that with Nisos, but he certainly had his ducks in a row. I would imagine that a race like this, they're going to go through the same protocols. But again, it's going to be a race that I'll be very curious to see how horses from the U.S. banishing is an absolute kind of an X factor.
Yeah.
David Jacobson shipping over there. I don't know what he'll do. And then we've seen rattle and roll, clearly with Kenny McPeak, Kenny, our very own Kenny McPeak, and his idiosyncrasies. So, how do they ship? I think that's going to be a big question, and how they tolerate the environment.
Yeah, I was really lucky last year. Rattle and Roll was there, of course, and spending a lot of time with him at the barn. He was very unique. He had his own way of doing things every day, cooling out. He got his daily roll back there, very fitting for his name. But I know I shared some of those videos of when I was doing my daily recaps at Straight No Chaser. But kind of a fan favorite, and obviously the locals have bought into him. So proven over the track, and there's no reason why he couldn't go over there again and be a factor.
Yeah, well, that's going to be an incredible, not only an incredible race itself, but an incredible card. And I know those past performances are going to pop up here, and the fact that they have the draw complete, the fields are full indeed. We're looking forward to it. And of course, if you're tuning in on a Saturday morning, we've got you covered on FanDuel Racing. I'm going to miss the fact that at this stage, it'll be next year. I'm sure we're going to be there with a horse owned by MyRacehorse. So God willing. All right, let's talk about the Derby trail, Joe. It was news a couple of weeks back that trainer Todd Pletcher, spendthrift, unfortunate news that Ted Nafi, your unbeaten champion of 2025, was off the trail due to bone bruising. Explain to our viewers out there and our partners what takes place when a horse encounters bone bruising.
At the end of the day, I always compare it to almost humans, of not necessarily overtraining, but it's when these bones take too much concussion at the end of the day. And we have so much technology now between our nuclear scans and PET scans, which are able to detect these things before they become a serious issue. So you may hear it a lot of times in our updates. Our horses have bone bruising, and a lot of that is due to our due diligence and a change in horse racing, I'll say in a whole, over the last 10 years of these modalities that can detect these things. So that bone bruising is usually starting from the inside of the bone out, versus when we take our typical x-rays, it's looking from the bone outside in. So at the end of the day, I think it's only positive changes. It's always disappointing news when we lose one of these big horses to the Derby Trail, especially our Breeders' Cup champ in Ted Nafi. I always want to call him Ned Toffee still to this day. But
right.
Ultimately, that's what it is. It's doing the right thing by the horse. It's something that typically we always say certain things have a certain time frame of healing. And I think we've learned over the years with bone bruising in particular, until you do that follow-up rescan, that's when you know if they're ready to go back into training. So it can be anywhere from that 60 to 120 day mark. Very few cases are more than that, but usually in that 2 to 4 month range, you're usually pretty healed up.
Yeah, and I mean, I like to say, these horses are ever changing. I mean, clearly the campaign he had last year was par excellence. I mean, he went perfect 4 for 4. He debuted at Saratoga. He put an exclamation point on his championship with the Breeders' Cup Juvenile at Del Mar. Things are great, but that's the idea of this whole Derby Trail. I mean, it can change in a heartbeat. And if Hannah, just keep it right there for a moment, you can actually note now that Todd Pletcher, you saw the Sam F. Davis last week. This horse came home with big strides for the Lowe's and Mike Rapoli. Todd Pletcher, all of a sudden, he's got 2 horses that are in the top 5 nearly. We saw that win in the Holy Bull. You come right back with Renegade. So I'd asked this question on the air the other day, and I'm going to ask you the same question, Joe.
Oh, boy.
If you had Renegade and Nearly, and on the other side you had Ted Nafi, do you trade 2 for 1 or do you keep the 1?
Oh God. Well, I think in the game of horse racing, in my mindset, anytime you can have 2 chances, it's better than 1. I think the 2 that he still has available on the hunt are improving colts that have the right right to be peaking at the right time. So it's a hard thing to do for a horse to win the Breeders' Cup at 2 and go on to the Derby. I think that's why you don't see it happen as more often as you do, because that campaign becomes so demanding, and they don't really have a time from that first weekend of November to get that, proper break, what you would like to give them, to have them freshened up for now another very hard campaign. Because at the end of the day, you don't win enough points in that Breeders' Cup race to get you in the Derby. So you got to come back and have a pretty serious campaign still.
All right. Awesome. Awesome. Here, sending in a message. This is a good one, Joe, because we've watched this horse train better part of the summer. He's obviously tried turf 3 times. He comes off his career best, and that would be Plutarch, successful on dirt and turf. Is this typical? What's the way forward? And I would say that way forward meaning what would be the next step with those horses. I think we can pretty much answer it. I mean, this is a Derby contender in Bob Baffert's eyes, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the Robert B. Lewis was the test if he was going to be able to go on to the Derby or not. And I think he passed with flying colors. I found it interesting just from a handicapping standpoint, looking at that race. I couldn't really make up my mind on the obvious contenders. Desert Gate, I just, to me, I almost feel like he's a one-turn horse. So I was trying to figure out a way to beat him that day. And I said, well, what about this Plutarch? And I went back and watched all his works. Interesting enough, in between races, he still breezed over the training track one time, but then he came back and he worked back-to-back times with Winston Avenue, who's half sibling to Warranted, the Justified colt that we have available or sold out now at Saffie Joseph. So been paying attention to those two quite often in his works over the dirt. Such an efficient mover. I get why he can run on both surfaces.
Right.
But any opportunity you have to put yourself in the Derby, they're going to be taking it, especially with that pedigree. Stellar Wind being the dam. She was one of my favorite race mares of my childhood.
Well, we kind of heard from Bob Baffert, multiple times, whether it be in interviews, but he talked about how this horse was a bit immature. Thank you, George in Inglewood. He's a fellow FanDuel TV watcher. Love George. Tricia Hill, always good to see you back, although we can't see you. We can see you figuratively. But Plutarch was that horse that kind of hasn't put it all together mentally, right?
Yeah,
He, in so many words, was mentioned another horse that was owned in part by MyRacehorse, the name of Authentic. It's dating back to 2020 pandemic year, essentially kind of put us on the map. Do you see similar characteristics despite the fact that Authentic really wasn't being tried much on the turf, if at all?
Yeah, I mean, I could say from a mental standpoint, I would think even Authentic was maybe he had a little more of his idiosyncrasies of not running quite in a straight line in the first few of his races. But, the only thing that makes it a little harder for me to compare is Authentic was so fast and this horse wasn't.
Yeah.
So I think this horse just really had to learn how to put it all together. And the mental side was a big part of it. As I said, he's one of the best movers. When you see him work, he's as efficient as they come. And I think that's what attributes to them always saying he can run as far as you ask him. Even Andy Harrington's workout reports before the race, distance is no problem. However far they want him to run, he will run. And I think that attributes to how good of a mover he is.
Yeah, I mean, considering the fact that Authentic won the first 3 races of his career, that you're kind of comparing apples to oranges. I think it really came down to the mental aspect, because he talked about how this horse was a bit just immature, kind of slow to learn type thing. So maybe a bit atypical for a Bob Baffert horse, Derby contender, much less to come from off the pace. I mean, because he's clearly the king of all trainers that has been able to put speed into horses. So the fact that this horse comes from off the pace is a little different, to say the least. But he certainly looked the part, and I wouldn't take anything away from Intrepido for Jeff Mullins. He's got 23 Derby points. I have a hard time stipulating who my Derby horse is, but I'm excited to see what litmus test does in his next start. He's coming out of Los Alamitos Futurity. Chad Brown, I know that he certainly has some Derby contenders in mind, including the favorite out of the Kentucky Derby Future book in Paladin. Now, you've had a chance to see a number of these horses. Do you have a Derby horse in mind?
I don't, as I kind of said, I just feel like my mind now will change so much. I mean, if I had
Yeah.
to give a horse my top pick, it'd probably be Nearly. That he impressed me quite a bit in the Holy Bull, and I think he just has the right to really continue to step up. Uh, he was so far off of the pace going, I believe it was 7/8 two back, and then he put himself so in the race so easily. I was shocked. I didn't think he would be able to have that speed, even stretching out in distance. So I just think he's potentially a colt that's peaking at the right time. Still a long ways to go. There was a few horses actually in early January, a month ago today, that Bill Mott unleashed. He won two maiden special weights on the same day. Uh,
Correct.
Chief Wallace going 7/8. He beat Puma, who came back to run third with a miserable trip in the Sam F. Davis. Definitely could have been second with a cleaner trip. I don't know if he would have beat Renegade. And then
Correct.
Thunderously, who was a gun runner colt. He debuted around 2 turns. He looked pretty heavy in the paddock. That one, unfortunately, has not come back to work. He was one that I was really keeping my eye on. So I'm still, my fingers are crossed that he might pop back on the tab and have a last minute hope to win one of the big ones. But those are two even that I think can change up the score. I believe Chad Brown had another 8 length main special weight winner a week or so
Canaletto.
ago. Canaletto.
Canaletto.
So,
Yeah, he was monstrous. I probably got, people obviously know being from Vegas. They're like, hey, what can you get in the futures? He's 18-1 in the future books, which for a horse that has one start, but he's another son of Into Mischief.
yeah.
I would like to have a prop of which sire do you think will sire a Kentucky Derby winner this year? And I can guarantee you that if you were to bet on Into Mischief, you're probably not going to get better than 3 or 4-1.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kathleen Kaufman, thank you. She points out Golden Tempo. We know this horse for Cherie DeVoe, who debuted sprinting, stretched right out with that victory in LeCompte. He's an Arisen Star this weekend, Kathleen. And look, I think this horse is as good as any, Joe. And I don't know if you've had an opportunity to kind of watch his replays, but didn't break well in his first start. And he didn't necessarily break super sharp in a LeCompte, but boy, he sure does run like a horse that's going to appreciate added real estate.
Yeah, I love when you see the chart inhaled the rest of the field, and that's really what it was. My only knock to this horse, clearly the ability is there, but he's going to have to work out a heck of a trip if he makes it in the Derby. 20-horse field speed, early speed is not really his forte. Still some time to maybe figure it out. And as James is saying here, a fabulous family coming from the Phipps blood, but I would just struggle to back that horse and feel confident knowing that he's going to have to work out such a trip, and that would be my only knock on him.
Yeah, Golden Tempo. Always nice to see a horse that's a homebred heading toward the Derby. Silent Tactic, according to James Darmody, said Silent Tactic has the best. James, I hope one thing is for sure, that you bet this horse in last week's Southwest. I mean, I have to admit, we had a couple of analysts on FanDuel that were on that one, in particular, Ashley Mayu and Matt Carruthers. But what'd you think of that horse? Joe, Silent Tactic, impressed?
Yeah, you have to be. I mean, Cassie is on an absolute tear at Oaklawn Park. And this is what makes it so fun, right? You have a horse that really was not on anybody's radar to then put up a performance like that. He's got to be on the radar. I still would like to see him back that effort up to really get behind him. I actually paid attention closer to the race prior when he ran fourth, and I believe Mark had another one that won that race. But why not? I mean, this is what makes the Derby so fun. It's all about getting hot at the right time and having your best performance. But the way he did it, distance is not going to be an issue with this horse. And you got to think he only has the right to keep improving.
All right, Joe, blackout time for our friend Kenny McPeak. Thank you to DJ for sending that in. Blackout time. No doubt about this horse's ability. The problem with the Kentucky Derby is the shot clock, right? I mean, we haven't raced since the Breeders' Futurity. We scratched out a Breeders' Cup Juvenile due to a vet scratch. There's some gap in activity. It would take some magic, I think, this horse to make the first Saturday in May. But you know what? This is 2026. I've seen crazier things.
Yeah, I mean, Kenny always said this was his horse, right? I felt like he kind of called his shot early. Um, this is what the Derby kind of does to you, and I'm certainly Kenny McPeak has forgotten more about horses than I know, but this is kind of one of those typical situations what I call you're trying to now fast track a horse to get back onto the Derby trail because of timing. He had 91 days between works, October 24th to January 23rd. He breezed 1 3/8, 1/2, and now most recently 5 days ago, already breezed 1 5/8. So he's moving along pretty quick, and that's what he's going to have to do to make it. He's certainly a talented enough colt if he's able to handle it. But these are the typical situations I think when the pressure is so hard, we'll see if he'll be able to, kind of stand up to it.
All right. Well, again, that the Derby picture is just so. When Ted Nafi defected, I mean, clearly that opened up the ball game for many a horse because I think at the time he was at 40 points. We kind of generally feel that line to qualify, it's probably closer to 50 now.
Yeah.
Especially with horses that are coming in the guaranteed spots for Japan, the Middle East. That certainly made it difficult for horses here in the United States. Winning Stride. Joe, I was next to you at Preakness in 2025. Wanted to introduce myself. My introvert side won that battle. Had to say hello. At least, yeah, never be bashful. Joe's a lot nicer than I am. Just kidding.
You probably didn't want to be next to me after that. I was screaming like a little girl. So it was a lot of fun. Or actually, that was 2025. So that was last year. Well, you should have came up. I was in good spirits that day.
I don't even remember.
Yeah, I don't even remember either. I was thinking 2024. That's how I was screaming. But never be afraid. Find me out of the crowd. I tell people that all the time, standing in the morning. Just if you see me at Clocker's Corner, just grab me.
Yeah, that's the crazy part. So we talk about it's one beautiful thing about My Racehorse because we're all participatory. We're all part of this My Racehorse family when we win. Even when we get beat. Again, I tend to remember the good days more so than the bad days. But unfortunately, we get lows, right? And we often talk about when we have a problem and we have issues with horses that come up. I will say that for the most part, the ownership groups have been great, always looking out for the well-being of the horses. But when you do win, as I often say, celebrate because you never know when that next win's going to come along. And I mean, clearly based on the years we had, 2024 was next level. And obviously we had a pretty solid first half of 2025. And then obviously looking for that next big horse. All right. Let's, I think if we've got questions, Hannah, let's perhaps bring up some of those questions. And we're going to talk about some updates with horses that are currently in training. So for those that are tuned in right now, I don't have necessarily a head count per se, but again, it's great to be back here on February 10th with My Racehorse Live. I am Nick. That is Joe. And, if you've got questions pertaining to anything, just try to keep it concise, keep it direct, and always keep it honest. We'll do our best to answer those questions. But as they come in, Joe, talk to us about, this past year was probably most difficult the last 6 months with the loss of the coach, D. Wayne.
Yeah.
For him coming into this whole equation with us at My Racehorse, it was a godsend. His horsemanship, his likability, his affability. He was a man's man, and the fact that he left us, it was a tremendous loss. And clearly now we have horses that were under his care that are now kind of in other barns. So kind of touch on that and how difficult the decision was to think and come up with a trainer. And two horses in particular are Caldera and Money Problem.
Yeah. I mean, obviously having to deal with that situation when it happened was tough, right? We had such an amazing run, which at that point in his career, it wasn't necessarily what we were expecting. We knew it could certainly happen, but it made it a little more rewarding to see him go out and go through that journey with him. I never thought in my life I would be communicating with D. Wayne Lucas about horses in his barn. So for me, even that was just amazing in those few moments, whether it was at Saratoga or at Pimlico to be able to spend time with him and pick his brain about certain things was very, very cool. But then we kind of had to snap back into reality. And granted, both horses had to go for a little break. So we had some time to make those decisions. But I think it was just being tactical of just like what we would do when we would go to sale to find D Wayne a horse, right? We tried to buy him a certain horse just like we do when we buy a horse for Bob. So it's now finding the right programs for these horses. Knock on wood, so far everything is going great with both horses, and I'm sure we'll get into that here.
Yeah, we've got some content for you that will pop up. Joanna, hopefully that answered part of your question there in regards to have several horses at Gulfstream this spring. Kind of a broad stroke, if you will. I mean, there's a lot of things happening in regards to horses coming up to races, but maybe just touch on a few of them, Joe.
Yeah, well, let's just start off the bat, right? We'll get into Caldera. Well, we made the move to go into the barn of Saffie Joseph, and we thought this was a horse that would be, I hate to compare a horse like this, but you talk about a horse like Skippy Longstocking and what he's been able to do with that horse of tactically placing him all around the U.S. in big purse money races. And that's kind of what we wanted to do. We wanted to find a trainer that we have the belief that Caldera can obviously turn into a top handicap horse. That's our goal. But the reality is he still has his 1X, right? He's still a 1X condition type horse, and a long way to go and purse money to be made to get to that point. But he's coming back great. And we just thought this was the perfect spot for him. We already just had our first half-mile drill, and to me, my eyes, I got to see him on multiple occasions during his break and progression at Highlander. To see the changes he made physically, we always knew his size when we bought him as a 2-year-old. He was, going to need time to mature, and I couldn't believe what he accomplished as early as he did. And now he's kind of just turned into the total package. So let's hope coming off this break, he really puts all the pieces together. And, he could be a dangerous older horse for us.
Yeah. How does a horse like this fit? And you just mentioned connections, obviously with Saffie Joseph and having the condition of an entry level allowance. So to put it plain and simple, the entry level allowance is like, okay, you're now in your sophomore year, in your junior year, and you're just trying to graduate. You're trying to graduate up a class ladder. So we're not having to worry about dealing with a White Barrio or a Skippy Longstocking right now. So ideally for you, he comes back in an allowance entry, right? Where do you want to be by summertime with Caldera in, as I say, a perfect world of imperfection?
Well, that's a tough question.
Or an imperfect world of perfection, right?
Well, I think the great situation, I would say I'm hoping by April, and I'm maybe just being a little safe here with my assessment, that we're getting Caldera back in the starting gate by April. We're most likely going to need to have him fit and ready to go 2 turns off the layoff. He's probably not a horse you're going to want to bring back and necessarily give him a race going 6 furlongs. In my opinion, if it was a 7/8 race, different story. But 6 furlongs, I think he would just be kind of run off his feet. So I think tactically you're going to have to kind of find the right spot for him. But in your back pocket, you might want to be prepared to run him back going a mile. Great thing at Gulfstream, 1-turn mile as well that you can have. So there's going to be options there. But I'm hoping we can run through our conditions pretty quickly and have some, Saffie sends a string to Saratoga. We could be looking at some races up there. And that's really kind of my big picture, is that come summertime, we have a chance to at least take a shot at a stake or 2 here and there.
Yeah, I kind of want to add to the idea of Saffie Joseph. I think the one thing that I think we can all appreciate is communication. I will say that, full disclosure here, we don't get the best communication from every trainer. We get good communication. I know there's a lot of stress levels are involved, having trained horses myself. I mean, times have changed. Then we weren't quite as interactive, but owners can go on the internet and look up a condition book. I mean, we find that out with our Facebook groups, right? And I think for the most part, the groups are good. However, sometimes I think we have a tendency to put the cart before the horse. And we have to be very careful and cognizant of that. But I just want to say that, in the world of Safi, whether you, myself, whether we reach out to him, he's very good at getting back to us in a timely manner. And that's important in making, management decisions. So appreciate your patience as partners and understand that when it comes down to it, we're always putting the horse first. All right, Winning Stride. Obviously, our expectations for him this year, look, ultimately for me, is to make it to the Breeders' Cup, make it to a Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile or a Breeders' Cup Classic. I mean, that's the ultimate. You try to manifest these things, but clearly you got to take it step by step. All right, let's move on to another former Wayne Lucas trained money problem. Got to love the fact that he is in work mode with Michael Trombetta. And Michael Trombetta, he was a great introduction to Team MyRacehorse. I mean, the job that he's done for us. And has he only had one opportunity for us thus far, Joe?
Yeah, he had Rosie's Alibi
Yeah.
and did a tremendous job with her.
And that's the other point that I wanted to touch on. We designate horses to certain trainers. Things may not work out. However, the difference with her is when she essentially went to Mid-Atlantic, right? She went to the Mid-Atlantic and was able to evolve and clearly go out with a bang. I mean, she earned nearly $200,000. She was a stakes winner. She won 3 in a row. So the idea that, wow, he looks great in this work.
Yeah, he does.
Oh my, I don't think I've seen this one.
Yeah, this was his most recent gate drill over the weekend, going a half in 48 and change. Jorge Diaz, I believe.
That's a nice looking drill there.
Yeah. So, I mean, he is a spectacular looking colt. I would say he's not your typical Munnings because he's got a little more size than most of them.
Right.
But he sure looks the part. The Trombetta team is very, very happy. We're just trying to figure out what's the best starting point for him. The work previously was over the Tapeta there, and he worked very, very well. And the rider came back and kind of said, I think this horse wants grass. And then he comes back and works his big gate drill over the dirt. He may be a horse that can do either. I was having a chat with Michael Trombetta's assistant, Chris Arrow, the other day, just about, kind of what our options are. I believe it's Fountain of Youth Day. We have a maiden special weight going 6 furlongs in the dirt. That's the 28th. And then there's also a turf race going 7.5 furlongs. I believe that's on the 22nd. Whether he's fit enough for that race, my conversation with them says, if we're going to make a decision like that to go 7.5 on the turf on debut, I sure want to make sure he's fit enough for that task. Otherwise, I'd have no problem even knowing that race on the 28th would probably be a very salty edition of a maiden special weight given the day it's on.
Right.
Those races always seem to have a few horses to unleash, and maybe he's just as talented to do it. But kind of circling back on why we chose Michael Trombetta, right, for this horse, my thought process and our thought process going into it is that Trombetta kind of gave us the best of both worlds, right? Clearly, Wayne was always very high on this horse. Baz's assistant was always very high on this horse. But we weren't able to really see how much we could get out of him because he only got up to a half mile before we had to stop on him. So I think Trombetta gives us that great ground that, even if he's not a top tier horse, I mean, we can be a very dominant horse in that Mid-Atlantic region as well, but he also has strings at Saratoga. He has strings at Keeneland, and it kind of gives us the best of both worlds to run where he is going to be able to strive the most.
This is great to see. I mean, Nikki, by the way, Nikki Morris, hello, thank you. And of course, our colleague at MyRacehorse does fantastic work in her own right. And I think just watching this drill and kind of reflecting back when we purchased him at Saratoga, I remember, the hope that was there. And the one thing I appreciated, I mean, granted, he is by Munnings, huge fan of Munnings, and the fact that his family tree indicates that he could potentially get better with distance. Would you agree? Do you think he's a good winner?
No. When you see this horse physically, he screams 2 turns to me.
Yeah.
So it doesn't surprise me at all that they brought up that 7.5 furlong turf race. And then when you look at the dam as well, She was a 2-time winner going a mile on the turf, broke her maiden going 7/8 on the synthetic. And then she kind of flip-flopped between running, elongated sprints and, mile and a 16th races as she got into the stakes ranks. So no surprise to me if 2 turns is what he wants to do. But at the same time, it does seem like he's got some speed under him, which you like to have.
Well, I mean, when you think Munnings, I mean, clearly, Myler would probably be in the cards, out of a Malibu Moon mare. His facial characteristics, although his head carriage does not reminisce APND, he has that facial expression of that. So let's hope that he can stay sound. Knock on wood. I think that's the big thing. And again, appreciating the partners have been very patient. The one thing I will say, it's a lot easier to be patient with a horse has talent. Clearly.
For sure.
All right, Nancy, good evening. What's up with black tie optional? Any idea when he will ever get to his first race? Boy, that is the $1 million question, Nancy.
Yeah.
Talk to me, Joe.
Yeah, well, obviously, between the both of us, we've spent a decent amount of time over there with Mike at Los Alamitos. We had to take a little pause in our training where he got just over 3 weeks of hand walking, and then this past week the track was closed, so he's just getting back into the swing of things. As I've kind of been explaining it to other people, because he's had a good amount of works under him before that break. He went out of training, but he didn't leave the barn. I was just there 9 days ago, a week from Sunday. I mean, you sure wouldn't think that he hasn't been doing anything for about a month. He looks great physically. Mike had all positive things to say. So it certainly gave me confidence. That comment you just said, it's easier to be patient with horses that can run. Mike was really kind of reiterating that. And in the beginning, I don't think that was a slam dunk, right? This was a horse that we had to stop on once before. And when he came back from that little break, he started to put things together mentally. And being by Not This Time, our experience with Sons of Not This Time, they're not meant to be summer 2-year-olds, I would even say. And it's a perfect example. Our talk with Nearly kind of peaking at this time is when they're kind of all putting it together. So, to answer your question, if I had to put a guess on it, I would say we're probably still at least 90 days away. 90 is probably a safe guess. Maybe it's a little quicker, but the one thing about Bob, he gets a lot of works into them before they run. When they do run, that's why his horses are usually the term giving them a race. They usually don't give them a race in that barn. So it's hard to answer the question, but that's what I would my best guess would be about 90 days, hopefully. Muted. Uh-oh. We lost sound, Nicholas.
Sorry. I was doing mime. I do mime now. I do sign language,
I panic when I think I lose you. I panic.
Don't ever panic, brother.
I'm going to have to host now.
You've got this. Okay, this is a good one from Tricia. This is a very good one because we have varying opinions between our committee. And obviously we listen to you as the owners, but how do you determine which trainer gets a horse?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, there's a few different aspects to it. One, we look at it a very horsemanship perspective of what horse fits what trainer, right? So when we talk Dwayne Lucas, we talk Bob Baffert, their training programs are a little bit harder than, say, Mark Glatt or Safi Joseph, right? They maybe are a little bit more patient. So with those guys, we're looking for, very correct horses, good bone in particular, things like that are going to be up to handle that training and knock on wood, we had great success doing that with Wayne. And that's a big part of it. And then marketing, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we listen to the owners of what trainers that they like. Even though I don't love it sometimes, I pay attention to the Facebook groups and we hear and listen to the people and the folks. So we kind of choose trainers that we see people are enjoying. And at the end of the day, our updates are a big part, right? Being able to have trainers like Dan Blacker and having the success with Dan Blacker we did, he sure makes, I think, the experience great, right? Anytime he gets on camera for us, he sends his voice memos. Those make the experience more enjoyable for the owners as well, to be able to follow along the thought process of that trainer.
But that also makes our job easier, though.
Oh yeah, I was trying to not focus that so much to make our jobs easier, but yeah, it
No,
definitely makes our
but
job
the
easier.
truth is, in order to make smart decisions with these horses, we
Yeah,
kind of have to, understanding that some trainers that we have have in excess of 100 horses, right?
yeah, very
Maybe
tough.
it's a little easier for Dan Blacker because he's isolated here in California to communicate,
Yeah,
right? I mean, we rely, whether it be on you, Matt O'Connor, Brian Didonato, I mean, Nikki Morris. I mean, we rely on our team members to kind of keep everyone informed.
mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, when we're having to rely on Morse code sometimes to get information, it makes it difficult to try and give you an estimation on where are we going to be 6 months from now,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
But I look, the truth is that when Michael Barron set out the plan with my racehorse, it was all experiential. Okay, so when you try to focus in on a trainer, which trainer is going to give us the most and the best of all of these different worlds, right?
yeah,
Communication. Are we going to have a good time? Can we win a few races? And it really comes down at the end of the day having the horse. So to your point, I mean, clearly when we're at sales, we're trying to find the fastest horses, the most correct horses for not the amount of money that some people would spend.
yeah.
We don't spend millions and millions of dollars on horses. I mean, we try to go in. I mean, look, if we can go to a sale and find a straight no chaser every other year, we're golden. We find an authentic once every 5 years to buy into. Great, but we want to double that. We want to triple that. We want to quadruple that.
Of
So,
course.
all right, but it's an interesting concept because there are trainers that we have that are clearly better with sprinters, turf horses, routers, synthetics. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. All right, Carrie Thompson, Joe Moran, which 2-year-olds are you most excited about? Good one, right? That's your question.
It's always tough. This is the most common question when horses are on the site. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, we like them all, right? Because these are the horses that we picked of our yearling crop. So, it's such a tough answer. I'll say horses that have kind of caught my eye. I was always a fan of the Jack Christopher Colt by Divine Mercy at the sale. Maybe didn't have as much pedigree in that first dam of success of other offspring, but he was one of those physicals that really jumped out at me. And I remember standing there with you, and we kind of walked up to the ring saying, all right, we're not sure if we're going to do anything here. And when he kind of landed where he was stopping at, I said, we can't let this horse go for this. And it was kind of all about being right place, right time. And I'm excited about Jack Christopher. I have a few other instances where I've been involved with Jack Christopher's of some horses that I've purchased for pinhooking purposes. And I'm excited for him. I feel like he kind of lost a little bit of steam. I feel like he was the steam stallion early on, and then I feel like there was a quiet period. But I think they have the ability to be early types and fast, and he's got that speed look to him. So he's one. And then I think the easy answer would be the Justify Colt Warranted. I mean, he was the powerhouse at the yearling sale. He's potentially, your big dream horse. And I think he has that right to be. Mute, unmute.
Once again, Joe. Once again,
It's our first one back.
So long as you can see me is
Yeah.
key. Start to Party would probably be the horse that I'm most intrigued. I enjoyed hearing what Wesley Ward had to say as far as just like giving the updates on Start to Party. And, he brought up a good point. We try with the yearling sales to try and go in. I mean, we've got a budget all the way around. I mean, we don't have an open checkbook by any stretch. But when we purchased him, I kind of felt like, when you think of that sire Constitution, you think, oh, they're going to be better as they turn 3, right?
I like this older.
But this horse, I think, is going to hit the ground running. I am, very good.
Yeah, we need a good name.
Look, some people may want me on mute, but we'll just keep it real. But Start to Party, I think, is most intriguing. And what about our Flightline filly? What is the latest on her?
She looks great. I mean, this was one that, this Saratoga sale, I always say I feel like we're finally getting good at it. It's the hardest sale, in my opinion, to work, even though there's only 200 horses. But it's a very tactical sale, and the sale becomes very, very hard. And we
Yeah.
struck very early in doctorate, who, we always say if you can strike early in that sale, I feel like that's the only point of the sale that you can potentially get value. And that first like 20 hips, I'll give it, is the only time you can get value, because I feel like people are, there's always like, okay, well, I can wait for this one. And then we kind of sat there for a long time waiting for that flight line filly, and we said, okay, we know we're probably not going to get her, but we're going to sit here and we're going to do our best to try to get her. And I remember Michael Behrens was with us, and we had to kind of keep it under the cool. I wouldn't tell him who we were bidding on. I said, you just got to hang out here till the end, and we're going to take one final shot. So to bring her home, I was thrilled. I mean, to get Flightline out of an Into Mischief mare, she looks like a rocket. Seems to be handling everything well. I mean, we kind of see Kieran, he does not, even though he does a lot of pinhooking, his horses that he preps to race, he's very patient, does a great job with all of his field work before the winter time. So I enjoy watching all his updates that he does on, his education program. But now they're getting to the point that they're going to be kind of starting up, and I'm excited heading to the showcase this week. And we'll have the showcase down in Ocala to kind of get fresh eyes on all these 2-year-olds. So it changes so much. These horses physically, mentally change in such a short period of time that every time you see them, you kind of say, whoa, something jumps out on you at something new on each horse. So I'm excited to get it.
They're ever changing. I mean, it's like, a young child that's 12, 13, 14. They summertime comes and they come back, for their middle school or their freshman year, like, oh my God, what happened here? And sometimes it can go the other way. Certain horses may have been a bit mature early on, and all of a sudden they never grow. So the key is trying to kind of forecast, where they're going to be from here to there, and that may help us work these sales, trying to, buy it at a lower level and not having to spend an exorbitant sum of money. The other factor that comes in with certain trainers, just to backtrack a little bit, Joe, obviously when we have partners, outside partners, say Dan Blacker has a client, he would like to partner with us. Then we collectively try to go out and find the right horse that's going to fit that program.
Yeah.
So we try to appease the process, so to speak. Okay, Rich comes in, Mystical Bell. I know that you'd sent an update. What's the latest with Mystical Bell with Safi?
Yeah, I think this is actually a great question, and not the first time we've got it via email as well. But to clarify, everyone, this is kind of sometimes when I say the biggest curse in racing is winning too early, because race options become less available. So we're very lucky, right? She's run 3 times. We got a second, 2 wins, broker maiden, then won her first level allowance. Now, after that, you won't get a second level allowance written this time of year for straight 3-year-olds. You're not going to run her against older horses. So your only options are looking into stakes for what she is, of being a sprinter 1, and most likely needing the synthetic or the turf. Even though we had considered the dirt at some points, I wouldn't say that's impossible. We just opted to bypass the race at Turfway on New Year's Day. Safi's wanted to get her on the turf. And that this race on, I believe it's March 22nd, the Melody of Colors, kind of was the plan. She got a little sick. It's been a while now. Right after she worked, which I think was the end of December. And we just decided to freshen her up in that point, just knowing there's not a race on. No need to kick on. We kind of bring back the Ted Nafi whole situation, right? At some point, these horses have to have a little bit of a breather from their training. And hopefully, she'll be around for some of the bigger 3-year-old races later in the year.
Yeah. And by the way, kudos to, our trainers. And I think that in-house, we take pride in the fact that, when we purchased yearlings, 2-year-olds, the 2-year-olds of 2025, that we also purchased the 2-year-old training sales. I mean, I think our statistics rank up there. So, props to our acquisitions team, our scouting crew, yourself, me, Brian, Matt. It's been, a concerted effort, and it certainly doesn't go unnoticed. Not an easy thing to do when you're buying these horses at a young age and getting them to the races at the stage in which we were able to. So hopefully we can continue that. I mean, clearly for the Breeders' Cup, I mean, that is our goal year end to try and get multiple horse in the Breeders' Cup. And again, Oaks and Derby, we're hoping that we're going to be participatory, if not sooner, no later than 2027. But have some things in the works. Hopefully we can maybe scout a horse here that can put us into the starting gate the first weekend in May. All right. Well, thank you all for those questions. If any other questions pop up, we've got a few minutes left in our show, but do we want to update you on the Broodmare band? Some exciting news, Joe Moran.
Yeah, so here we got Sintra. This is the one that we are kind of on full watch to. So I actually talked to Nicole this morning from December Farm. Her night watchman said 2 nights ago she could tell that she's starting to become a little bit more restless, and she said, she's getting a little softer in behind, which is usually a sign when the muscles around the tail tend to relax a little bit. Means they're starting to get comfortable and get ready to do it. So we're hoping, really, the next night or two, we will have a baby on the ground to seize the gray baby. So, that's the plan. It's been great. I mean, obviously the weather has not been great in Kentucky, but that's probably delayed the process a little bit, and it's not uncommon for maiden or first year mares to fall on the later side as well. So no concerns there. We'll just be excited to get that foal on the ground, and then hopefully get her back in action to straight no chaser.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that, Joe. I know it can be a little bit of a dicey proposition because, mares, when they're falling out, having been involved at a very young age, and now, mind you, I grew up in Las Vegas. Dad always had the Derby dream of taking a Nevada bred to the Kentucky Derby, which came very close back in 1972 with One-Eyed Tom. Yep. But seeing a mare fall out, you've been there, right?
I've only one time when I was a young child. My father had a mare named Analyst. Wow, this is a throwback way back when. Yeah, right. But yeah, that's the only time I've seen it in real time.
I don't know what our guidelines would be, but sure would be kind of cool to. I mean, we've seen it on camera, but for like one of our own horses. But the problem that lies in there is obviously if things don't go well, right? The mare has a miscarriage. It's kind of that's hard. It's really hard. I mean, it would probably be difficult for me to like be there when the baby's falling out. As emotional as I would be, it just God, there's so many things that go wrong. But hopefully, from a weather perspective, once she decides to have the seize the gray baby Sintra, it'll go smooth without issue. Anna, appreciate let go over a little hostage by Seize the Gray. By the way, how is Seize the Gray doing as far as the update from Gainesway?
Yeah, he's doing great. I mean, obviously he had, I would say, a very successful year one in terms of covers.
He's the man. He's the man.
Naturally, year two, it's dropped off fairly significant, I would say. And talking to Ryan Norton, our team, talking with the Gainesway team, they said this is kind of a new trend that they're even seeing, where it used to be third year was the toughest year for a stallion, but now it's almost that it's turning second year after that demand where, these sales markets have turned so commercial and sales have become so popular that the breeding world naturally has taken that same reaction. So, I think we're going to take a pretty big hit compared to last year, but I'm still hopeful he'll get over 100 mares, but he'll be somewhere right around there, 90, 110 in that range. So still a great number. And then I think now, as we're going to start seeing more and more Seize the Gray babies on the ground, and then I think as you see them at the sales, I'll say like Mage, for example, was a stallion that I wasn't really sure about, right? And the more I saw them at the sales, any doubt I had of him as a stallion and the offspring that he could produce, it wouldn't stop me from breeding to him in year 3 based off what I saw. So I think a lot of those things will, resurge people to go back to him. I mean, at the end of the day, fastest son of Arrogate at stud, it's hard to not like him.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to allow this question to come in here. I know it's the first day back with MRH Live, and certainly I'm appreciative of it. Nick Hines, Joe Moran, and the questions that have come through, we've done our best to answer them. One thing to keep in mind for the future, and we'll try to get you kind of on a schedule to know when these shows are going to come back, and then perhaps you could, present questions you may have. Thoughts on Puka 24? Where do we stand on the naming contest here, by the way, Joe?
Don't mark my words. I think it's in action.
Is it? I thought we were down to like the final four, weren't we?
Well, yeah, no, I'm not saying in action. I meant like it's in the process of happening, the naming
Oh,
contest, not the
okay.
names in action. Okay, on
I
mute.
got you. Okay.
On mute. We still have time to put that in.
On mute, yeah.
On mute.
All right. So talk to us about the progress report here. What is it?
Doing great. I'm excited to see him because I actually haven't seen him in person since I did the inspection before we bought into him. So I'm sure he's changed a tremendous amount. But Matt O'Connor's been down there a good amount over these last couple of months, checking in on him, and he looks the part. I've talked to Ian Brennan a few times over there at the farm, and I hate to say, at this point when they haven't done as much, he's a horse that's hard to not like, right? So all the reports are positive. I think at the end of the day, none of them have done enough to really have a judgment on them. And I think that's what makes it so fun, but they have to go through all these preparations to be ready for their speed work.
All right, we're going to go a little over time here, Joe. I know that we were
of course
intending to cut it at an hour. We're just past the hour point here. 6 o'clock on the left coast, 9 o'clock in the east. Prez comes in. What's the plan for Baccio? That was a great win at Del Mar. Trainer Wesley Ward, what's the latest here?
Yeah, well, he's back in full swing now, working down with Top Line Sales in Ocala. So that's who that was co-breeder on this horse and still our partner after buying in. So, he's back on the work tab, kind of increasing his workload. He's looked great. I mean, we knew he was fast. But he's won even, I would say, from the time we saw him, Breeders' Cup weekend when he ran, and just being able to follow him those, month or two leading up to that race in Southern California. He's changed a lot physically. His hind end, he's strengthened up. So time off, perfect example of benefiting a horse. Wesley's plan was always to kind of bring him back and have him ready for March at Turfway in that stake. So as of right now, that's still what we're training up to. And just every work here moving forward is kind of a test, but I would say it's probably, we're not far away from him heading back to Wesley. I wouldn't say maybe another couple weeks, but I wouldn't say much longer than that.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is with a horse like this is the fact that, he was turned out to just kind of basically decompress a bit. Having 3 starts to begin his career, 2 wins and a second with that impressive allowance victory we saw at Del Mar early November, Breeders' Cup weekend. But, it'd be – I think he's a horse that has major upside potential. I mean, look, let's be realistic, folks. I mean, this isn't a horse that we think's going to win the Kentucky Derby or the Preakness at a mile and 3/16, but he's definitely a horse that I think has stakes potential. And I think he'll run both surfaces. I don't think he's going to be limited to just the grass. Royal comes in. I'm new to this world, but loving it already. When do the 2-year-olds first line up? Let's just speculate that means for a race in a perfect world of imperfection, Joe.
I'm glad Hannah put this up because I saw various questions on specific horses when we expect them to line up. I think it's preference to everyone. When's the first time a 2-year-old can run? It can be as early as Keeneland in April. When that meet starts, 2-year-old racing will kick off. Preferably what we like to do, and with most of the types of horses that we buy, we think summertime's the best time for those horses to get started. Just gives them a little more time to mature, grow up. A lot of horses that we do buy are kind of 2-turn type horses from a pedigree and physical standpoint. And at Keeneland, you're usually running 4.5 furlongs. But if I had to guess, we do have horses with Wesley Ward. Tom Amos isn't afraid to have one be ready to run early. Wesley's the king of Keeneland. If you told me start the party, continued to go on with no issues, would it shock me if he ran at Keeneland if he took him there? Not at all. But I would say, moving forward from that, I personally like to put our horses on those plans for the summer. And then you hope at that point you have a horse that can be around for November for the Breeders' Cup, right? That's the dream.
Yeah.
You don't have to accomplish much to get into the Breeders' Cup, but at the same time, it's that tricky world of balance, right? Of pushing enough to have them at their top peak fitness to be able to run, but also not pushing too much where they're going to have to go back to the farm. So, that's what makes a trainer's job so hard. And I certainly respect all the hours that themselves and their teams put in. But it's all about balance and which horses can handle it mentally and physically.
Yeah, but I think the other point is you mentioned trainers, right? I
Mhm.
think that when you consider Wesley, Bob, Wesley's focus is Keeneland Spring,
Mhm.
right? He focuses a lot of horses there. So,
Yeah,
it wouldn't surprise if we did see the likes of a
absolutely.
Dark Party pop up there.
Yeah,
But with Bob, it's more like Del Mar. But
yeah.
Bob clearly acquisitions a lot of horses, the 2-year-old in training sales, or even his yearlings. You'll see a few that'll come up maybe in May and June, but Del Mar's kind of his target.
Yeah, I would say you've seen that now a transition with his 2-year-olds that he purchases. A lot of them go right on from the
Right.
2-year-old sales. Those are his early ones, and then his yearlings are kind of the ones that come up in the summer. And I'll say, not to say Wesley just runs early, right? Baccio is a perfect example of horsemanship. Breakout win like that. It'd been easy to find another spot somewhere and take a chance to run, but we did the right thing by the horse there. So Wesley, if they take him there, he runs. But he's not afraid to give a horse time when they need it.
No, absolutely. Joe, as far as the showcase, let's touch on that real quick. As far as anticipation of, what transpires in these Ocala showcases.
Yeah, so I mean, this is I didn't go last year actually because I was in Saudi Arabia. So I've had a year off, but no, it's a great time. I think we got over 300 people, 350 people each day, Saturday and Sunday. It's a great opportunity for people to come out, meet the team. We'll have a lot of team members there. We'll get to see every horse train on the track. And then when they're cooling out, we'll do a little kind of walking showcase in the back ring at the sales ground. So everyone can see it there, ask questions. We'll have a Q&A opportunity to go back to the barn and see the horses as well. So it's a jam-packed day for what it is, but it's certainly a fun event.
And then finally, Joe, here's the kicker. Sold through the ring yesterday at Phasing, 77,000.
77,000.
All right.
I couldn't complain.
Well,
I was a little worried there at 35 for a second that the money wasn't coming. But we were going to protect her to a certain number to be a broodmare, but at that number, I think she was well sold. It's kind of the number. Brian DiDonato, he does a lot of pedigree work for us, and he was kind of spot on with his valuation of what he thought she would bring. And I think it ended up being a great result for us. Bummer that we didn't get to accomplish black type, right? If she would have done that, would have changed the score big time, but it's what makes it so hard and so fun to try to find the next one.
Yeah, we were very close, and that Brian DiDonato can certainly be sharp sometimes. All right. Well, I can't tell you enough how happy we are. First of all, to be back on MRH Live. Of course, Joe, the information that we processed over the last hour is priceless. And, big thank you to those that tuned in, presenting your questions, pass the word along to the other partners, your associates, obviously going forward, the more the merrier. And if you have any insight or you want to add perhaps to what we could include on these shows, there was a time in which we had the workout shows, both Joe and myself, which, maybe going forward, we'll include a segment, watching works and perhaps what we're looking for. Joe, final thoughts?
Yeah, no, it's good to be back. It's always fun to chat horses with you, and it's great to see all the questions. Right, it shows the passion. We try to do as much as we can to keep everyone involved. They're big stable, but we do the best we can. And I'll say I know we're going through a little bit of a lull right now, right? But that's what happens. This
Yeah.
game comes in streaks, good streaks, bad streaks. But all I can say is when we're in the bad streak, you know what comes next good. So just be patient, hang in there with us, and the next big one's coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Patience has been the virtue, and hopefully
Yeah.
we can fulfill the big weekends, bigger results of MyRacehorse. This is Nick Hines. That's Joe Moran. Hannah Bloom, we appreciate you with all the work behind the scenes. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you in the winner's circle.